This is the third day of the theme of change, and I want to read first of all from Matthew's Gospel in chapter 9, something that Jesus said. He says this: "No one puts a piece of unshrunk cloth on an old garment, for the patch tears away from the garment, and a worse tear is made. Neither is new wine put into old wineskins. If it is, the skins burst, and the wine is spilt, and the skins are destroyed. But new wine is put into fresh wineskins, and so both are preserved." Jesus says here, no one sews a patch of unshrunk cloth in an old garment, for the patch will pull away from the garment, making the tear worse. Neither do men put new wine into old wineskins. If they do, the skins will burst, and the wine run out, and the wineskins, or the bottles, depending on your translation, will be ruined. No, they pour new wine into new wineskins, and both are preserved. God is doing a new thing here. He's not doing a new thing within an old thing, or as well as a new thing, or in competition with an old thing. He's just doing a new, fresh, exciting, relevant thing, made for our time. Sadly, all of us are connected to an old thing. We've all got a past, we've all got old things, the way we do things. As I said in my first podcast on change, it's hard to pull away from old things because we get stuck in the old way of doing things. Like the woman in the winery I talked about on Tuesday, the religious leaders of Jesus' day were unwilling to embrace the new, and for them, tradition was more important than relevance. In addressing them, Jesus basically said, you can't use the new to patch up the old, and you can't use the old to contain the new. This is a new way. Jesus here was using an everyday example to teach a spiritual truth. An old garment will be torn if a patch of new cloth is attached to it, because the new cloth hasn't stopped moving. New cloth is prone to stretching or shrinkage. It is still flexible and responsive and reactive, and if it's exposed to certain elements. An old garment has stopped moving. It has been washed out and worn out. The fabric has had its day. It stopped moving. Jesus was saying, if you attach something moving to something that has stopped moving, something that's static, tearing and separation will pervade. The movement in the new wine fractures the old wineskin. That's what Jesus said, which has become rigid with age. And we can become inflexible and responsive if we get stuck in an old way of doing things. The inflexible wineskin lacks sufficient life in itself to accommodate the more vibrant new wine. So Jesus is trying to say, we need to embrace the vibrancy of what God is going to do. Let me read something from Isaiah. This is what Isaiah says: "Behold, I am doing a new thing. Now it springs forth. Do you not perceive it? I will make a way in the wilderness and rivers in the desert. The wild beasts will honour me, the jackals and the ostriches." Now I've got written in my Bible, the wild beasts are people who have done dastardly deeds. The ostriches are people who have hidden their heads in the sand. The jackals are the sly, crafty individuals. In other words, I think that the beasts and the jackals and the ostriches there can be applied to different kinds of people, and we've all been one of those things. But when you do a new thing, it says there that rivers will burst forth in the desert. I will give water in the wilderness. When you're doing a new thing, something exciting and vibrant, people will be attracted to it. And so as we begin church in a different way, yesterday I was saying at the end, when we come out of lockdown, when we start church again, little did I realise that church is beginning again. That on Sunday next, church will start. And we're beginning cautiously, easing ourselves after lockdown by beginning church again. Now it's going to be different. There'll be social distancing, there'll be sanitizers. there'll be different things that we'll have to embrace. But that's what change is about. And when we embrace them and acknowledge them, then it frees us up not to be restricted or limited by what we expected it to be in the past. So when we go to church on Sunday, and when all of us go to church, I don't want us to be rigid and inflexible. I want us to be excited that we are there. You see, that's what Jesus was talking about here. The Pharisees that criticised Jesus and tried and succeeded in getting him crucified were once devout, God-fearing people. They just didn't want to go the new way. They didn't embrace change. Now, as I said on Monday, change for change's sake isn't what I'm talking about. It's change that God wants. Martin Luther brought about change. John Wesley brought about change. If you know the story of John Wesley, he couldn't preach in the Anglican Church. He actually had to preach in the open air. William Booth's Salvation Army brought change. They were formed by the call of people to go out into the world and preach the gospel. Lots of people didn't like what they were doing. But God was doing a new thing through Martin Luther, John Wesley and William Booth. And that's what God wants us to do. Let me end by saying this. You all know about the Titanic, how it was the unsinkable ship that sank. I don't know whether you know, but the Titanic captain ignored 6 warnings about icebergs because he thought the ship was unsinkable. And if we ignore the warnings, then we'll end up sinking. He wouldn't change course. He wouldn't alter from what he was thought was the truth. Everything that is prospering for God is because God wants us to change. I just pray that this week we'll be thinking about it. And as we step into a new day, into a new week, into a new world for Jesus, I pray that we prepare to expect the change that God's going to do in us and us collectively as a church. Lord, I pray you help us this week to accept the change. You changed me, Lord, and I'm so glad about it. Help us to continue to accept you changing us.